Welcome to this Entretien JDRID 2021. This year around, we are shuffling a little our deck of cards. I had already two meetings, which you guys maybe have followed already. And tonight I'm very pleased to welcome Alp Tekyildiz, and he's going to talk to us about SwissRPG, which is a very interesting organization. I think it's based in Zurich, right?
Correct, yes. And hi, thanks for having me, by the way.
Very
it is
pleased
indeed
to have
based
you.
in Zurich, yes. Mhm.
So how about you present a little bit this project, because it's a very original project in the RPG community, I should say.
Yes, sure. So SwissRPG is a non-profit association. We started a few years ago, and our goal is basically to enable people to discover and play tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons in Switzerland, anywhere you are, and help people be able to play this very amazing game. Yeah, that's the in a nutshell description. Yes.
According to your website, I mean, most of the activities you carry out are done through Discord, right?
Yes, so this is our main communication platform, and we it didn't start that way, but we quickly got into it early on, and it's become our main way to chat with people, to have the community gather in one place. So everybody is there and is able to chat with other people from all over the country. We do primary English communication so that people from the French-speaking part, the German-speaking part, Italian part can all communicate, as well as expats with each other. And we also use it to facilitate the tables, let's say. So when you are playing in a game and you've signed up for a one-shot adventure for just one evening or a campaign, we have a bot that we've created that will give you access to a private channel for you and the other players, and then you can play there or like communicate, share information, create your characters, as well as if you're playing online, you can use our video and audio tools there on Discord.
I see.
So it's really our hub.
I can imagine it comes in really handy in troubled times, like during the Corona crisis.
For sure, yes. Yeah.
So just to be sure, it's like 100% digital. You do not organize live events, physically live events.
Well, we used to. In fact, we started primarily playing physically. So we would organize social events, but as well, we would organize people to meet in person, either at their own place, or we had also we still have, in fact, a few partners who offered their venues so that you can reserve a table there and play at their location when you can't do that from home. So we used to do mostly physical, but of course, when the pandemic happened, then we kind of had to adapt. And there were already some online gaming going on, but we realized, okay, now everybody needs to play online. So we very quickly adapted and transitioned everything to playing online. And that's what people are doing now.
When you say transition, was it more like a migration? Like you shifted over to the digital platforms? Or was it more like an expansion where you kept a physical baseline, so to speak, and also did the virtual thing?
It was really a migration because people just could not meet in person. And some people didn't want to do that. So of course, we didn't force anyone to do it. They just stopped playing for a while. But we realized people still want to play and can't. So let's help them be able to do that. And this is where we helped all the existing campaigns that were going on. We had about 50 of them all over the country. And we helped them migrate all their games to be able to play online. We trained the game masters as well to learn how to use all the virtual tabletop platforms like Roll20 or Foundry and so on. We gave them workshops for that.
And, so that they could onboard more easily to those
platforms? Yeah. Because a game master's job is already quite time consuming and they already have a lot on their plate. We wanted to make that as easy as possible for them. So we tried to just very quickly give them the
I see. Lower
guidelines,
the entry barrier as much as possible.
Exactly. Yeah.
And just so that the people that are listening to us have a more concrete idea, when exactly did you start, and And could you at broad strokes describe us the timeline of the main events that you had to go through to reach where you're at nowadays?
You mean for SwissRPG in general,
Yes,
not just for
yes.
the pandemic? Yes. Okay.
Exactly.
So we're in our third year now. The way we started was very organic. It was basically me being very frustrated not to be able to play role-playing games in Zurich. I'm from the French-speaking part, from Romandie, but I had been living in Zurich for a while, and I didn't know anyone who plays role-playing games. And I tried to meet people through friends, and it just didn't really work out in terms of scheduling and things like that. So at some point I was like, I really want to play. I need to find a way. And I went on Meetup, which is a platform for organizing events, and started a group there for role-playing games. And people started joining a lot. And originally I was just trying to get people to run games because you need game masters, right? So I was trying to convince people to do that, and just try to say, hey, if we're all doing this together, everybody can play more. That's nice. It was really for selfish reasons, to be quite honest. I really wanted to play, and I got to play a bit more and more. And then eventually I realized, hey, I'm not the only one. We're like 30 people now who also want to play. Let me organize, or try to have people organize other one-shots or campaigns so other people can play. And suddenly we're 100 people, and then we're 300 people, and it kept growing like this. And at some point I realized we need to make this a bit more official. And this is where the association came in. So we founded that at that point officially, made it a nonprofit, and kept growing, and also started expanding to other locations of Switzerland.
So to summarize, you started around in 2018 or 19?
Yes. So we started in 18. Yes.
On Meetup. I mean, from Meetup was like your cradle, like the place where you met your first colleagues or audience, and then you went on to found this. And you are the founder of the association, by the way, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And how many people do you have in your board, in your committee?
So right now, it's at the committee. It's just me, actually. We founded it as 3 people originally, and then the other 2, for work reasons, couldn't continue, and so they stepped down. So in the committee itself, it's just me. It's really we tried to keep the association as lean as possible. We didn't want to start creating a lot of overheads and admin work. But we have a team of volunteers, so we have several organizers, and we have community managers as well, and all helping out. So in terms of organization, we're 3 people doing the day-to-day organization of the association. And then we have basically between 5 and 7 community managers who are managing things on Discord and organizing social events and so on. Yeah.
And so these 3 people, including you are also volunteers, or do you get yourself a salary for covering basic expenses?
No, not at all. So we're all volunteers. There is money that is being generated there through donations, and we basically almost everything is free when you join the association. So you don't have anything to pay. You don't have a membership fee or anything. When you join a game and so on, that's free. The only time we charge is when we have some expenses attached to it, or if it's like a bigger event. And all the money we make either through those or through donations, or we also have a merch shop now. So things like this, we just leave in the association and to pay our expenses and so on. But in terms of manpower at this moment, it's all volunteer based. Yes.
And did you use Kickstarter platforms at start, or was this aspect something that came later on, just to maintain the ball rolling?
We did not do a crowdfunding, mainly because our expenses were not that big at the beginning. One thing that we've been trying to do is to make, say, things like Dungeons and Dragons content available to game masters and players who are playing with our association, just so that they can create their characters or get some resources for game masters. So we had expenses there and some other minor expenses. But it wasn't so huge that we needed a big crowdfunding. So at some point we realized, okay, we do have expenses, so let's have a donation system in place so people can donate 1 franc, 10 franc, 100 franc, whatever they want. And then later, so last year we launched our champion program, which is more of it's a bit like Patreon if you want. So this is something where you say, I want to support SwissRPG on a monthly or yearly basis, and you have different tiers, and you can do so.
And each tier correlates with a level of tier of premium content. Like
it's not content.
Okay.
One thing we really wanted to do was to make sure that anybody can join regardless of their financials. So we didn't want to lock some things behind a paywall, basically. So we did have some like little extra nice things that come depending on the tier you join at, but they're really just more like cherry on top. They're like more a way for us to say thank you or something like this. It could come with, like, say, an early registration or like having access to a channel where we give like insider information on what we're working on and so on, rights to vote on certain things and things like that. But in the end, it's really just a donation platform, right? It's people like what we do already. They already get the value, so they're willing to support us in some financial way. The rest is a bit like an extra thank you.
That's awesome. And how many people are we talking here? I mean, how vast is your audience, and how many regular participants do you have on your platforms?
Yeah, so we have currently, in terms of community, we're at about, last time I checked was over 1,700 people. This is all over Switzerland. We started in Zurich, so our biggest community is in Zurich, but
How many percent would you say of German-speaking people?
I would say it's probably more than half. I'm going to say 60, 70%, but that's really top of my head. I don't have an actual statistic there.
It sounds plausible if you started in Zurich.
Yeah, exactly. We extended to Basel, Lucerne, Bern, and then we also went to Lausanne and Geneva, but we're definitely not as big there. Yeah, so we're about 1,700 people right now in the community. We have, I'd say, between 50 to 70 campaigns going on right now. This is, again, top of my head, so it's not an exact number. I would say a vast majority of the community is active in a way of readership. So not everyone is writing actively, but at least is reading what's going on and is joining our server on Discord to see what's happening.
Do you mean like attending ongoing games, or just chatting around?
I just mean chatting around. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I should have probably prepared with some data before the interview. I didn't realize, but
it's fine. It's fine. We get the picture, I guess. And when you say you expanded to Basel, for instance, what does it mean concretely? Does it mean just having a channel which has Basel in the name and which is supposed to be visited by people from there, or does it mean more than that?
Yes. So for us, it was really because this was happening before COVID. So we had physical events, right? It meant having social events in those locations. Also creating partnerships with either game shops or places where we can play at, because this is one of the biggest issues for people who want to play, is they don't have a place to play. And so that's one thing that we're really trying to solve. And so
the basement of your parents' house is
exactly. Well, not everyone has that luxury, right? So
with a lot of candles and a lot of incense.
Yeah, that's the dream.
Biscuits.
Yes. So, but not everyone has that.
Sorry.
So.
Do you do biscuits? Do you have a brand of biscuits which is named SwissRPG?
We don't, but I should probably take a note of that.
I can't take you seriously if you don't, right?
That's a very good point. No, I realize now we've just been all wrong this whole time, and we really have to work on that.
You have to rethink your merchandising, man.
Yeah, that's true.
Sorry, I interrupted.
We have t-shirts.
So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it was mainly creating partnerships with venues where people can play. And then it was about looking for game masters, having game masters start running, proposing games, mostly one-shots so that more people can join. But it's having those games available so that people in Basel hear about, hey, I've always wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons or Call of Cthulhu or whatever the game it is. And they could just join and start playing immediately. That was that's what was considered for us expanding to those locations. Yeah.
I think something which you just touched on, which really pleases me, is the fact that you offer a hangout for all the people who are passionate about RPG, because RPG, I feel sometimes is a little bit like drawing, you know, you draw up to a certain age and then you stop, because socially and because of the responsibilities that that come across your way, keeping playing is a little bit like it is something you are supposed to move on in your life. It's sometimes seen as a little bit childish. So by offering this kind of platform, you're really securing a ground for all these people who can continue pursuing their dream. I mean, do you think that you are doing a service not just to actual people playing now, but also to RPG as a tradition, as a form of art, of live art, so to speak?
Yeah, I think there is definitely a culture around role-playing games, right? And then we've seen a real resurgence of interest around the genre in the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, let's say. We've started seeing that in mainstream media. We've seen things like Stranger Things, where people are playing Dungeons & Dragons. And with also live streaming of games and YouTube, people are more exposed to such games more easily, because there was always the question of what is really a role-playing game. You could explain it, but people would just not get it. Now, really, you can see other people play very easily. So I call this the new golden age of role-playing games. I really see a lot of people hearing about this and wanting to try. So it's quite interesting what you're saying. Actually, I do see that in our community, because we have very young people. We have students, for example, who are really keen on trying. And we have older generations as well, who played from the 70s or the 80s, who took a break and then are now seeing happily that there's this new interest and are able to play again. And I love to see tables where we have such variety of ages playing together, and it doesn't look wrong at all. Like nobody minds this. It's like everything is just fine. We're all adventurers in a fantasy world in the end, right? Yeah.
Do you think there is a difference in the way tabletop RPG is perceived across the Röstigraben?
That's a good question.
Perhaps there's no relevant difference.
I mean, there's probably some differences, and it comes from the cultural differences as well. But I've seen people from both sides play together. I come from the French-speaking part, right? I play with mostly people who are from the German parts or expats. And I think this is one thing that I like, is that once you're at the table, it doesn't matter where you're from. You are a level 5 wizard, you're an elf, you're whatever you are, and you're all here to adventure together. This is the nature of this game, is it's very collaborative, and we're all very, very eager to make this work for everyone, because if it works for everyone, we all get to play. I think those things dissolve once you're at the table, and then it's really just a matter of what you're rolling on your dice. Yeah.
Unless what you're rolling is always better than what I am rolling, because if that is the case, I'm gonna get mad.
That can happen, but you can't blame me for it.
These dices, I mean, they have the power of, they absorb all the extra energy that you couldn't spend in your day. It's so relaxing.
Are you the kind to magnetize, or like you have a proper way to keep your dice to make sure they roll high?
I absolutely pay a lot of attention to that, because that appeases me, and that's what's keeping me floating after a long day of work.
To me, it's very important that they stay on the highest value when they're in their box.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Otherwise, it's a slippery slope. You don't know where how low they're gonna end when you actually toss them.
Yeah.
So I
have to say, I roll pretty high generally. People have accused me of cheating because of it, but I mean, end of the day.
Well, some game systems do not really reward high scores, so careful.
Yeah, that's true. I should try those and see what happens. Yeah.
And speaking about that, which games do you still have time to play yourself?
Yes. So
yes, do you play on RPG, or are you cheating on your own creation?
No, so I definitely don't cheat, but I do play weekly. I'm in weekly campaigns since 2 years now, that with people I met through the association, so through SwissRPG. And we just had a session yesterday that was really intense emotionally. It was really beautiful. And I love playing. I would never, that's the whole reason I started SwissRPG, so I would definitely not stop this. I used to play more. Unfortunately, I don't now as much. And I used to be a game master as well many, many years ago. And now I had to basically decide at some point, do I make SwissRPG grow and be healthy, and or do I run games? I still do from time to time, but it's just very sporadic now, just because of time constraints. But I will not give up playing for anything in the world.
What are your favorite games to play?
I mean, right now I'm playing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. That's really like the most popular game, I would say, around the world.
Like the fifth edition?
Fifth edition is the current one, exactly.
Is it the one you favor?
Yes, because it's very accessible, I find. So that's actually the only edition I've ever played, because I got into D&D very late. I used to play other types of role-playing games before, like Vampire the Masquerade, World of Darkness type of games I was quite into. And that's what I ran as a game master quite a bit. But then when I got back into it, around the time I started SwissRPG, D&D was the big thing. And I really wanted to play because I could see other people play it. And
so that would be
like it.
That would be your main workhorse, or do you also play other systems?
I do play Call of Cthulhu every once in a while because it's a very, very fun game. I quite like that it's very role play focused. For those who don't know, it's more of like a modern horror type of game, and usually you play in the 20s, but you can also play in modern times. It's very, very role play centric, and whereas D&D is very combat focused, right? You can still make it very role play focused if you want, but things push you in that direction. And
exactly,
I've had a lot of really role play fun in one shots on Call of Cthulhu that were really unexpected. And I have really fond memories of that game as well. So that would be a close second. And there's always a place in my heart for the Vampire game, Vampire the Masquerade. I haven't played the latest edition so much, just because I didn't have the opportunity or time, but that always holds a little sweet spot in my heart. Yeah.
Awesome. Is also, do you think these games, and I think especially Dungeon of Dragon, are the most played games on your platform?
Yes, I would say Dungeons and Dragons is the vast majority of the games we have. We do encourage people to play anything they want. Like there's sometimes people who think we're a Dungeons and Dragons association because that's mostly what they see.
Telling from the website, I might have thought so as well.
Yeah, and that's just because, we're not going to tell game masters what to run, right? They decide what they run. And it just happens that D&D is the game that most want to run. So, I mean, that's the one you hear about on media the most. So it also makes sense and it's very accessible. But we have other games as well. And but I would say it's probably over 90% D&D currently.
I see. And also the fifth version?
Yes, primarily fifth edition,
yeah. I like this game, but I couldn't really get into the editions before. I thought you had to have a PhD in linear algebra to appreciate the version before it.
Yeah.
Very geometric based. And actually, it's interesting because I think Dungeon of Dragon comes from chainmail, which is a board game, so to speak, a war game like Warhammer. And
didn't hear that story before. But
I think that they like abstracted the rules from rules that were supposed to apply to stuff that were physically located on a board, and that's why you have all these distances, this positioning.
Yeah, but I mean the map with your minis and everything is definitely something that's widespread and used quite a bit, and I do think the rules encourage you to use that because there's distances of spells and things like this. But I've played quite a few D&D games where it's all theater of the mind. So you have nothing besides your character sheet. Everything is imagined and it works. You can still do it. And some people prefer that.
Yeah.
But especially the latest edition doesn't require that, PhD in math or whatever,
In
as you're
yeah.
calling it, like the previous editions did. It's very, very accessible. You can get into a D&D game very, very quickly. And we actually do initiation games to D&D on quite regularly, and people pick it up very quickly.
So I think our audience has some clear ideas about what this represents, but perhaps what they do not know is exactly what kind of an environment and of media you can provide through the digital platforms. So for instance, as far as a map is concerned, or as far as music or screen sharing is concerned, do you have guidelines? Do you have tools for the game masters and the players to play with?
Yes. So, I mean, what we try to do is to make it as easy as possible for people to play, right? Especially when you in the current situation where you have to play online. So one thing I've mentioned before is we do create private text and voice video channels for each game. So if you're in a game with 5 other people and you're the game master, then you have that private channel set up automatically. When people sign up to the game, they get added to that channel automatically by our bot. So you don't have a lot of work to do in terms of getting in touch with your players. And then you can just connect to that and start talking, playing when the time has come. We offer access to D&D Beyond is an online tool to access the D&D books as well as character creation. So that's really useful for people who want to play. They can create their characters with just a few clicks. And because we're buying all the books, they have access to all the options available that have been officially published. So that's easy for them to get into it. And then when it comes to the game master side of things, we have quite a few resources as well. So we have a library of adventures that you can run. We have maps and things like this. All of those things, they were either donated to us or we purchased, and make sure that we have the rights to share that within our community, of course. Some things were donated, which is really nice, by the authors. So that, if people are not sure what to play, then there's something they can find there. When it comes to actually playing online, well, usually people use those some of the most popular virtual tabletop platforms, which are not run by us, but that's usually fairly easy to get into. But if people are not really sure how, then we have those workshops to help them learn. The tools are already existing. We just kind of facilitate how they get access to them and use them.
What you've just said is interesting. So they would use, like, for instance, Discord to like meet and greet, and then they would typically go elsewhere on another platform which provides this kind of infrastructure.
Yeah, it's complementary. So you would still use Discord for mostly the voice and the video, and also like as the game master, you have to provide information that's often text-based or handouts, images and things like that. You can post all of this within Discord. And then the virtual tabletop platform would be more for rolling your dice, for that map and the minis and the locations of the minis. We've actually even added a bot for dice rolling within our Discord. So technically you could do everything from the Discord, but it's a bit less visual. So people usually tend to use something like Roll20 or Foundry. Yeah.
I know. Now I know I can hack your bot and make sure I win.
I'd rather you don't.
But do you have your source code open sourced? Help me hack your bot.
Our bot is open source, yes. And our bot is not doing the dice rolling. Just to be clear, that's an official bot that already exists.
Okay.
Our bot just takes care of managing the channels and things like this. Yeah.
Well, we'll come back on that later, because I have some questions for you about this open source thing.
Sure.
But yeah, coming back to this, to these platforms, I can imagine that some people would feel it a little bit difficult sometimes to play just on the digital platforms, because the digital platforms, especially Discord, it's a stream. It's a relentless stream of data, which you have to scroll down or scroll up, and nothing really. There is persistence. Stuff stays, but you still have to scroll up and down. Do you also have more static platforms or more static places where people can just write stuff, such as, I don't know, wikis, or other forms of platforms?
So currently we don't, because we haven't had the need for that at this stage. We really try to minimize the amount of platforms that people have to use, because there's already quite a few. If you think about this, we use Meetup for registrations to games and events, Discord for communication. If you're playing online, most likely you're using something like Roll20, you're creating your character on D&D Beyond. That's already quite a few platforms.
Yeah.
So we try to keep that to a minimum. We really want to keep things simple, and already there's some complexity. So we really try not to add too much fluff. But Discord has a lot of, you can work a lot with it and make it work for you. So we do have, as you say, we try to minimize that stream. So yes, you will have streams of just people chatting about anything, right? So if you go to our Tavern channel, then it's just people chatting about whatever they want to chat about, and then welcoming newcomers and so on. But when you're in your own game's private channel, there's only content about your game. So generally there's not a lot of chatter there, actually. It's easy to find information.
And it's searchable, so you can...
It's searchable. You can also pin important messages so that they're easily found. In my campaign, our pin message is, one of the pin messages is the map of the world, so that whenever we're like, how far is that place? We just click on this and we'll find it very quickly. Yeah. Nice.
So, I mean, this begs for the question: have you considered integrating all these features under the same roof, in the form of a web app, for instance? Is that something that you have considered?
So that did cross my mind. I think in the end, it was really a matter of like deciding what is worth the investment of efforts and time. I think that already having to migrate everyone from one place to another would have been a really big amount of work. We would have had to ask people to register to a new thing and so on. And especially I feel like when you have something like Discord, like Meetup, that are already doing a lot of the work that needs to be done, and we're a volunteer-based association with limited financial means, it's good to have these platforms that are constantly being developed, that are getting new features and so on. I think that, I mean, there would be an appeal to having our own dedicated platform for sure, but then it would mean that we cannot be found as much because we're not on Meetup, because Meetup is a big source for us of being found when people are searching for Dungeons and Dragons in Zurich. They find us through Meetup. Meetup is our biggest source of...
So just for audience to be clear on that, so Meetup is like so you have a big calendar where you can propose events and people can subscribe to events, right?
Yeah, it's in a way you can create a group around groups a hobby and events, or whatever that is. And then within that group, you can create events on any date. So the way this works for us is any game that is being proposed where people can sign up is going to be on Meetup, because there's already a whole RSVP system. There's a waiting list system. We don't have to create that from scratch, right? We did create systems for that to be tied to our Discord so that things are linked and that we don't have to do manual work all the time, like we used to in the early days. Yeah, it works pretty well. So like the Meetup is a pretty stable platform for us. Discord is a very stable platform as well. We don't need to reinvent the wheel that way.
Yeah, I can definitely smell the good interaction between the two. And so on Meetup, so you as an organizers, you would need to have like a premium account to create and set up events, whereas users don't have to have a premium account. They can just join and subscribe, right?
Correct, yes. So we do pay a yearly fee on Meetup to be able to do the organization. Anyone can sign up for free and attend. Yeah.
Does it grant you good discoverability, in the sense that does it allow you to have new users that just came across your things on Meetup, or do you really have to have like an extra do some extra efforts to get them to get to the platform and finally reach out to you on the platform?
No, we didn't. That's the thing. We did very little marketing in the early days. In fact, we did none really. Like what's great with Meetup is because it's very location based and it's interest based. So if you sign up and you say you like games and you live in Zurich, as we started in this case, we would show up there and be like, oh yeah, role-playing games. I've always wanted to try, and then just join, and then they're part of the community. So I would say a vast majority of our community came through Meetup without us doing anything besides, being active and having games available for them to join.
That is actually awesome, because I mean, RPG has a tradition of being quite difficult to onboard to from people who are not already acquainted with friends that do practice the activity. So it's definitely nice that you have lowered the entry threshold.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then we ended up being easily found on Google as well. So when people search things like Dungeons and Dragons in Zurich, for example, then they will find us at the very top. So that helped a lot as well. And it also helped that we created really good relationships with game shops, for example, hobby shops in Switzerland in general, just because we would tell them what we do, and they'd say, oh, we keep having people coming to buy the books, and they keep asking where to find other players. So now we can tell them, you can go join SwissRPG. And we're like, yeah, well, absolutely, go tell them. So that worked out really well as well.
That's nice.
Yeah.
And what exactly are your best, your most wanted features that you want to implement, or how do you want to expand from now on? What are your ambitions?
Yes, so we have a lot of ambition, and then it's really limited by time and money, I would say, but as it often is. One thing that I would really, really love to have is at some point, especially when the pandemic is over, I would love to have a space, a community space, a physical space where we can welcome people, where we have places where people can play and they can just hang out there and talk about role-playing games as much as they want. A cultural space, basically. And I'd love to have multiple ones all over the country at some point. I do realize that's probably the highest cost we would have. So we'd have to see, and maybe at that point we'll need a crowdfunding something. But that's one of the things that I would really love to have. And then I'd love to have bigger projects. We've actually just started one recently called Swiss Marches, and it's a bit like a mix of West Marches and Adventures League. So a way where it's a collaborative shared world where multiple game masters come together on a given night, and then their dungeons are available for business, let's say, and players come and just join randomly one dungeon or the other, form parties on the spot, and then on a second session remix, go to a different one or go back to the same one because they couldn't finish it, and so on. And the characters persist and level up.
So a lot of improvisation, a lot of card shuffling there, because I mean people can just choose at random where they're going.
Yeah, so they would get a bit of information in advance as to which dungeons are going to be available that evening. But the idea is that every time you join, it's going to be something a bit different. You're going to be with different people, and just see what happens and have a good time. So things like this, where it's a bit more collaborative, would be really nice to do more of. So we've started the Swiss Marches now. We've done also mega games in the past, which before the pandemic, which are basically like a 40 to 60 people game, which mixes board game and role-playing game mechanics. And we love to be in conventions as well all over Switzerland. So we've been to the Zurich Game Show. We really wanted to be at Fantasy Basel last year, but couldn't because it was postponed. Because we can meet with the people who are within our community, but also people who haven't heard of us, and that's
Orc'Idée.
A really nice feeling.
Orc'Idée, of course, right?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
I know you didn't mention because you're too humble and polite, but that was on your top of your mind, right?
Of course, the very first. But yeah, no, I mean, right now everything is a bit up in the air just because we can't really meet in person. But as soon as things reopen, absolutely, we wanna be in all those conventions.
It's interesting because it rings a bell with respect to what you said before. So you mentioned that you have like 1 foot on the in the physical world, where you really give people the opportunity to mate in person, but also you have all these numeric platforms. How do you help people to make to keep tabs on who is who? Like, for instance, if I have an avatar, or if I have an account on Discord, and then I meet people from my party in the real world, how do I keep tabs on them, and how do they keep tabs on me? How do you match the physical and the virtual worlds?
So we don't manage it at all, and it leads to a lot of funny things. I think that whenever we have a social, people usually have to give 2 names. It's their real name, their Discord name, sometimes their adventurer's name, their character's name in their whatever game they're playing.
They should disguise in their avatars. Actually, they should just matched 100%.
So actually, some people started doing that now. It just kind of naturally happened. But so I've always been the same name in real life and on Discord. But some people started doing their nickname and then slash their real name there, so that there's less confusion. It just kind of happened organically. Yeah.
This is fascinating. So yeah, the frontiers between the 2 worlds are very thin, I can see.
And it's really funny, just because sometimes fictional characters more than the real people behind those. It's quite interesting, especially when you play a lot of one-shots where you just meet for 1 evening or 1 afternoon, and then you don't play again together. And you do that with lots of different people. And at some point, like, oh, you're that barbarian, right? It's like, yeah, I am, but I'm also Steve. It's yeah.
Have you ever been like surprised? Could be in both ways. Could be disappointed by someone who was very fun, a very pleasant person online, and a really dick in the actual life, or vice versa. Because context, I mean, we are animals, so context shape us, and they shape the way we behave.
Yeah.
So
I mean, sure. I mean, there's always I think that when it comes to playing role-playing games, there's a lot of compatibility things, right? Like you and I might not like the same kind, even if we play the same game. Yeah. We might not like to play the same way, right? And that's fine. Generally, that can happen, and it's not a big deal if we realize that we'd rather play at different tables. Then that's totally fine. I wouldn't say. I mean, sometimes you see people who are playing a character that is very strong or confident in something, and in real life they're not so much. But I wouldn't call that disappointing in any way. It's just it's a fun little quirk about this type of game. But I have to say that one thing that's always amazed me, and I'm always so grateful about, is just how positive our community is. You'd think that when we're at 1,700 people within a community, there would be a lot of issues happening, a lot of infighting and so on, but it's actually happened so little. We don't have trolls. I mean, people disagree on things, of course, but everybody is very, very nice to each other. And it's really humbling to see that happen. And I'm very grateful that we have such a great community.
Speaking of that, I'm aware, I don't know if you're aware, but there is an organization which does the Cyberconf in French, the cyber conference.
I'm not aware of that one, no.
So they, sorry, not cyber conference, cyber convention. Okay. So it's a convention which is held online. And I think in order to really keep the place a very peaceful place, they had to consider applying some behavioral rules so that people would behave, and especially in view of some minorities that sometimes can be vulnerable, even when people do not intend to be offensive, sometimes they can happen to be offensive against their will. Is that something that you had to, is it an ingredient that you had to take on board your recipe for success as far as the digital platform is concerned?
Sure. I mean, so that's something that I'm particularly interested in. That's something that I really care a lot about, is to make sure that people are being welcomed, and that we have that we're inclusive of as much diversity as possible. So this is something that I've communicated about, and I'm actually working on an official community guideline right now to kind of explain what our values are currently. But this is something that we've always expressed in day-to-day chat and so on. Of course, there problems happened in the past. There were not big problems, some minor problems that can happen where people feel offended in some way. It's never been overly dramatic, and I think that I'm also kind of I prefer not to have strict rules. We do have a few rules, but they're very, very few. Like I think we have just three rules. And the rest is more about showing by example, and kind of rather than say, stop, you can't do this, more like say, how about we head in that direction together and try to be more productive about this. And that generally resonated well with the community. So, but in the end, it's really about showing by example as to,
I see. Do you know these rules by heart?
The rules?
Yeah, the three rules.
Yeah, so the rules is to be nice to each other. I'm not quoting them. That's not how we wrote them. But to be nice to each other, to not advertise without asking prior request, just so that it doesn't become a bazaar or a souk. But usually we say yes, but we want to make sure that it's all fine. There was a third one, but I can't remember now. It was in the lines of the first one. It's like a repetition of the first one, like be nice to each other. I think that's the main thing. Yeah,
probably, and probably the fact that you don't have that you have so few rules is testimony as to how pleasant it must be on your platforms. Because if you don't need more, that's amazing.
Yeah, and we did have. I think that in any kind of community that grows big, you do have the risk of starting to want to become overly protective of it. Yeah, and then true. Also like maybe the people who came first might say, oh, these newcomers are not who we are. And we haven't had that, fortunately. I mean, we might have had like little sparks of this coming, but I think that's a trap that you don't want to fall in. Otherwise it turns into a cult, and we don't want that, right? This is a platform for everyone. We all have a shared passion or interest. We love playing role-playing games. At the end of the day, if there's drama or something like this, what matters is that we just roll dice. And I think as long as we can keep that in mind, we'll be fine.
I mean, you definitely appear to me as someone who really knows his business. I mean, have you had a previous experience in the private sector and in businesses? I mean, I'm not asking you to tell your whole biography, but I mean, where did you get these skills that allow you to be so laid back when it comes at these complicated matters?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I think I do have a laid back nature in the first place. That helped. I did have a background in communication, so I think that helped as well. And it's also, I think, the fact that I care a lot about those things and making sure people are being included and not being discriminated on. I have to admit that a lot of it was just learned on the spot, because I never expected this to get so big. So there were times where I had to really come up with like, there's that issue and I need to react to this, and I don't really have a lot of knowledge. So I tried to get the knowledge if I could, or tried to make the best educated decision I could. But I think it's not just me really, like also the people around me. And I think some of the people that were involved early on also instilled that mindset of like, let's be a positive force. Let's be, let's care for each other, and let's not start going into
personal attacks.
Yeah, and drama and things like this. And I think that anybody, including myself, can react emotionally to something, or somebody can have a bad day and say something mean. Anybody can do that, but it's good to maybe take a step back and try to, let's say, okay, maybe there's more behind this. And maybe, open an ear to hear more about this. Yeah.
Well, what doesn't kill you definitely makes you stronger. And
that's true.
What were the most overwhelming obstacles you had to overcome in these last 3 years? So.
Let's see. I mean, there was, what would be the biggest one?
Perhaps none. Perhaps you were blessed from start to finish.
No, there were definitely challenges. I'm not going to lie. There were definitely challenges. I mean, we did have, I think that, I think that in my early days, I was trying to be maybe overly protective of what I had built, and also trying to please a bit everyone too much. And I think that maybe I would say in the early days, I was keen on like saying, okay, we're the biggest association, we're the biggest group around role-playing games, and let's be the biggest one. And I think at some point I realized that's not really what matters. I think the point is that we play, and I don't need to be jealous or like to be overly protective about this. If people play wherever that is, that's what matters, and it's good to share with everyone. But it took me a while to get to that place, but I'm quite happy I'm there now. And yeah, and the pleasing everyone, I realized it's just not really possible. And maybe I shouldn't identify to what SwissRPG is too much, because even though I started it, it's not just me, it's 1,700 people. So I'll try to do my best, and I have my values, and I have my boundaries, and I will just go with that in mind. And I will try to make sure people understand why I do certain things a certain way. I think my team is the same, and it's not going to be for everyone, and that's okay, because there's actually quite some other options out there, and hopefully everybody can find a place where they're happy and roll some dice. Yeah.
Well, there is definitely now, thanks to you, a place where we can play proper tabletop RPG in Switzerland, even during the pandemic.
Yes, I think that's one of the big achievements is that I'm quite happy about, is that you can still playing. And my pleasure, and thank you. I mean, it's not just all me, right? If we had no game masters, I'd be very happy in my association, but there'd be no games, right? So I'm very thankful we have such great game masters who are willing to run games for random strangers as well. That's really humbling.
I think I'm gonna drop by one of these days, and I'm sure our audience will be interested.
Please do, yeah, absolutely.
Alp, thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you. And
thanks a lot for having me. It's been a pleasure as well. Yeah.
All the best for SwissRPG.
Thank you for Orc'Idée as well.
Thanks.